Hi, everyone. Good morning. So great to see everybody here in person. I'm Smita Baliga, and I'm at Webster Bank, where I do a few different things, and that's what I enjoy about being there. I oversee a regulatory relations team that coordinates all our regulatory exams for the bank. I also serve as the bank's chief privacy officer, and within the compliance function, I advise the business on any digital services. And an additional thing I'll add is Webster recently merged with Sterling National Bank, so we're bringing two banks together. And as part of that, we went through a huge initiative in terms of culture activation. And so I am very proud to say that I am a certified culture facilitator, and one of the roles that I really enjoy. Really happy to be here.
Good morning, I'm Vanessa Levina. I know everyone was expecting to see Howard today. He was in advertisement, but here I am, new and improved Howard. So in my role currently, I oversee global anti-money laundering with the footprint across all of the geographies where MasterCard is operating. And together we tackle the tough waters of AML and sanctions.
Wonderful. Hi, this is Ritesh Ghosh. I drive North America's growth business for HCL Software. A bit about us and why we are here. HCL Software is a new entity, a division of the larger HCL that got formed by acquisitions of multiple softwares over the course of 6-7 years, and we are now a separate HCL, a software shop. By revenue, we are amongst the top 25 software companies in the world. Our own journey, we started out as an AI, you'll see dry eyes out there. We started out as an AI startup about 5 years back, before we just recently got merged into HCL Software. We were one of the first to hit critical mass revenue as an AI startup, and which is where it brings us to why we are here, because we have invested a lot of R&D money in working with banks and financial institutions and fintechs. Quite a bit of that is being kind of plowed into the GRC space, and hence, which is why we're here. Lovely to meet you. We look forward to a great session. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just want to remind the audience that we'll be going through a series of questions, and feel free to pose any questions to us via the Brella app. Thank you. So we'll get started? Okay. First question. What regulatory challenges are currently top of mind, and what operational adjustments are required to address these challenges?
So I can start, Jen. I would say from a regulatory changes, clearly there's so much. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a US-based bank. Given the events of earlier this year, and all the focus from a consumer protection perspective, there is a lot of change. But I would say what the focus really needs to be is your risk culture. It really starts with that. What is your risk culture at your organization? And also really thinking about compliance from a revenue protection perspective. If compliance leaders and compliance teams do their jobs well, you won't hear them, you won't see them. And you won't have fines and penalties and enforcement actions. So it really starts with the risk culture, thinking about compliance as revenue protection, your strong governance processes from being able to identify, assess, manage compliance risks, and then I would say from a testing, doing testing to make sure that anything that you've advised the business on, you're testing, and again, that is your strong base from a governance perspective. That's what I would say.
Vanessa?
Yeah, so I'll add to that. And when dealing with our global footprint, as MasterCard operates in more than 200 countries, there are so many challenges, and having the right culture, it's exceptional point. I totally agree with that. Also having the organization in mind, that how do you put together a structure that brings together all of the regulatory frameworks all around the world, and going down all the way down to the nitty-gritty of nuances where you have challenges between the city, state, then you have the federal component, and overlay that with a global footprint. And now you have all these regulatory components, all these laws, all these regulations, and how do you deal with all that? At MasterCard, where we are, our typical approach is that the stricter rule prevails. For us, and because that is certainly a starting point, so making sure that we have a right balance approach. I understand there's the components of doing business, and that needs to be further broken down. But in the nuances where you have multiple regulatory frameworks and regulatory developments that come in, especially in the AI space, how do you balance all of that? How do you balance the regulations that are coming from foreign geographies down to the city of New York regulations, right? So having the right organizational frameworks and connecting all the dots together. So what is that typically? That's typically your risk assessments, that's typically your understanding how your data is all comprised, and what is going to be your right team that leads that in those initiatives. So again, the culture, organization, and then when we're talking about the teams, having the right folks in place with right skills. So balancing the legal, the business side, and then now we're talking about tech. So we all know how important it is to have the tech-minded individuals and those who understand and interpret the requirements. And now we're bringing the AI element. So now we all have to bring all of that together, and the RegTech, and this space is not new. I mean, those of us who have been in the space for a while, you remember probably back in the days, we used to get regulatory updates in CDs. Anybody remember that? Or am I a dinosaur in the room? So those are your first, thank you. This is your first presentation of and where we came from those little CDs that we used to get like once a month, downloading into your computer. And now we're in the space where we have machine learning, we have all of these components. So are we able to, as the compliance professionals, to understand that? And we'll go I'll pass it on to my colleagues again, so because I can talk for a long time. But if so these are the main challenges. How do you balance all that? So people, really strong organizational framework down to data, and the right culture in place. Because we all know in compliance it's really difficult to get funding. This is actually, that's probably number one challenge, right? Let's just be real. That is number one challenge because we're not revenue producing. And revenue protection, I actually really, really like this term. I'm going to use it from now on. Okay, I'll pause here.
You know what, and as I completely empathize with you, we want you to get more budget. We'll help you get more budget. As partly our jobs. But I think we are seeing a lot of see, as a manufacturer of of AI, we really look towards the markets, to our advisors, to our partners, and particularly our customer advisory council to tell us what the AI needs to do, where the intelligence is of use, what to model, what not to model. So I think we'll probably delve upon this a bit more as we progress in the conversation, Jen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Next question is, how are financial institutions leveraging new technologies to effectively address the regulatory challenges?
So I'm going to use one word, cautiously.
Evolving challenges.
I would say with we were talking about this before, the recent interagency third-party guidance that replaces all the previous guidance really, I would say, emphasizes the importance and really the ownership and accountability, because I would say all of us rely heavily on third parties for all kinds of processes. But at the end of the day, the ownership is, with the bank or the organization that is engaging with the third party. And so how do you do that due diligence, the ongoing monitoring in an efficient way, right? And I would say that really is a challenge with the increased reliance on third parties.
I'll go on for a minute or two. All right, so many tools that are utilized by various financial institutions, and some folks are not using tools. So, there is a balance. There's still spreadsheets. We are always in the space of looking out for new tech and talking to vendors, and always trying to balance what it would be the best solution for us at MasterCard. And sometimes it is not one solution, right? There's always many, and there's always many providers. And in combination to that, there's spreadsheets too, because there's some jurisdictions that are not covered. And we've seen this in financial institutions. So in our conversations with many financial institutions, we're also seeing those challenges that there's not one solution, right? There's not one golden ticket. And what is it that we can do as a tech company to assist in that space, and what can we do for MasterCard as we develop something that we can use and then learn from that, and then if we can be helpful to financial institutions, that's always number one priority as well for us.
I completely agree with Inessa and Smita there. I mean, the core function of AI is to make sure that one's size doesn't fit all. Everybody has a custom need. You've got to address the risk. But let me get the big buzzword, the carrot out of the bag. Gen AI, Chat GPT. Let's get that out first. Everybody's talking about it. I think by the time we finish today's meeting, there'll probably be 1 million conversations on Chat GPT, right, and Gen AI. So yes, it's definitely an evolving market. We're already building prototypes. We're building use cases. We hope to see very soon some use cases in production with some of our customers. Yet we're watching this, to borrow Smita's phrase, cautiously, because it's got to operate within the corporate framework, the premises of compliance frameworks. But one of the use cases that we have just kind of built out is how do you use generative AI, conversational AI, to pull in a reg report, pull in all the relevant data, pull in all the controls, and feed it to a large overlaying observational platform that then predictively measures the controls to the metrics to see are you going to hit that process or not. So that's on Gen AI, Chat GPT. Let's go deep dive into a little bit into AI and ML. Smita's absolutely right. I mean, when we started out as an AI shop, it took us years, I think 2 to 3 years, to break into the GRC space for the first time. And understandably so, because you're there to mitigate risk for the financial institution, and you need to see the same from technologies that prove themselves. So I think AI is kind of it's proven. We are seeing expanding use cases. Examples of some of the things that we're seeing now is dynamically scoring risk. Which I think it's starting off with certain things like can you look at an asset manager? They've got to produce daily NAV reports. Are you able to kind of measure the risk and report it, and are you going to miss those SLAs or not? I'm hoping that in the future, immediate future, near future, that creates the segue for more risk profiling with behavioral AI in areas of market risk, operations risk, et cetera. So that's something that we're seeing, and especially like looking at internal and external data. To data, well, data and RegTech, brothers in arms, goes back a long way. I won't go there, but let's talk about MasterCard, for instance, 206 countries. We are seeing increasing cloud adoption, so accessibility of data, distributed data, has just been burgeoning up costs. So what is relevant, of course, is we're being asked by our Customer Advisory Council, give us platforms that can help us intelligently manage resources and compute resources in cloud, ensure there's integrity. Agile, another thing that's happening, multiple global teams all touching data and rules. How do we work on the integrity of data and rules? Um, we're also seeing the advent of FinOps. I think at some point, you mentioned about compliance directly touching into revenue, balance sheets. So at some point, chargebacks, showbacks would be important. We believe we are starting to see the advent of FinOps and very creative commercial models that helps you adopt FinOps as we go along. I think the last part is we are also seeing a lot of business apps being run on endpoints, devices, smart devices. How do you get the endpoints to be secure? I think a lot of people miss that, right? So do you have intelligent software that can run the patches intelligently, keep those devices secure, especially when it comes to point of sale? What is the inbuilt intelligence into point of sale, digital banking, mobile banking, et cetera? I mean, those are some of the things that we are seeing being adopted today, Jen.
Great, thank you. What kind of technology ecosystem should FIs leverage to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of their compliance activities? Sita?
Yeah, I can start. I would say, again, it comes, I would say, down to some of the basics. If you can do the basics really well, and I would say your risk assessments. And how can you do your risk assessments with information that keeps it fresh so that you're kind of, because there's so much change from a regulatory perspective, from your environment, how can you do your risk assessment as much in real time as possible so you're not always kind of looking back? And how do you bring in, whether it's complaint data? Complaint data is being able to truly understand and analyze your complaint data to see if there's any regulatory violations, what's the root cause, what are any themes, your issue management, your reg changes. So how do you, I would say something that we are continuing to be challenged with is how do you keep your risk assessments as fresh as possible? We're not in the age where you can say, oh, we do it annually and we're looking at last year's. You have to be as current as possible. And if you get, to me, that if you can get those basics right and have a really strong risk assessment, then you can start to, add on to it.
Yeah, that was a very, very strong point. A risk assessment is truly your roadmap for everything that you're going to do across. For us, I think one of the biggest challenges are silos. So silos across the organization, your data privacy will have one tool that they're using. You'll have AML and sanctions team using something else. The regulatory, how does it all come together? How does it all play together? And what would be the right tool? That is always top of mind for us, eliminating silos between the teams, and using the current tools that we have without naming any vendors, making sure that they're producing what is it that would be best, and how do we leverage that particular solution across many channels. And like I said before, we all know there's no golden ticket. How does it all come together? So having the right folks at the top of the pyramid, let's say, that will bring it all together and able to spot and provide the right guidance to across the organization. Also, once you implement the solution, we all know that it creates a lot of noise if it's not properly tuned, and those particular notifications could really make it problematic of how to the clearing the day-to-day operations of that. So operational components are truly important as well. So I think we have some use cases as well. That,
Can I just jump in? So I would say I agree with everything you're saying. I would say that when I talk about the basics, it's the taxonomy, right? And making sure that the taxonomy that you're using across the organization is harmonized, because even if you do use different tools and different systems, if you have a harmonized taxonomy, then you can have all the various systems actually speak to each other. Otherwise, you spend a lot of time just interpreting what is coming out from one system or one process, and how does that convert into the metrics that you spoke about, Ritesh? How do you convert that into the right metrics? So I would say, again, basics, your taxonomy is so important. But go ahead and.
I think I'll just pick up, two cues from there. Taxonomy and then desperate. very diverse systems. So look, see, as an AI software, what are we supposed to do? I think really two things as a manufacturer of software. A, do we give you the right tools that gives you the right user experience to onboard your subject matter intelligence, your business intelligence onto our platforms, right? I think that's one. The second is, how do you then model the AI that can then solve real-world problems? So some of the things that we are seeing, the early movers, the early buyers are doing. So, typical banks, you've got a lot of monitoring. I mean, if you look at your whole business process, like if you look at an end-to-end compliance process, the total monitoring on the underlying systems, on the data center, on the clouds, on the network devices, on data, on rules, on logs, it's enormous. I was just talking to somebody, it's a mid-size, typical mid-size bank, it's $5 to $6 billion of revenue. Guess what? They're producing about 7 to 8 million logs a day, right? So more monitoring means more data, multiple systems. So what we're really seeing a lot of early movers adopt is an overarching operational observational tool. What it does is it kind of picks up the data, aggregates really data at that overarching level, and then you have the business. So what happens with too much monitoring is one aspect of that business flow is getting monitored. You don't have the end-to-end view. So the overall observability really is onboarding that end-to-end view so that you have start to end, you're looking at a particular business process and know predictively what's going to fail. It's, again, managing those metrics and controls on it. We're seeing people use that. And I think one of the places that I hope to see increased usage would be the operational resiliency, which I think has a deadline for March 2025. I think the equivalent of that is DORA in the EU. This is obviously with the feds. And we're hoping to see significant amount of use cases evolve there. And then you then tied that with intelligent remediation. And I think one of the challenges with remediation is, a lot of people talk about AI, but then I always question, what is the AI? Where is the intelligence? Is that AI model thinking the way a human would? Are you looking at those millions and millions of data points created in a day as a human would? Are you able to sample the data as a human would as a real-time problem is emerging and then remediate? And what if, and this is something that you see in compliance all the time, a new compliance means you're suddenly looking at new problems. And when you have a new problem, is that AI thinking as a human would, researching as a human would, giving you suggestions? And once you fix that problem, does it have the right GUI, the interface to help onboard train itself on how to fix that problem? So when that happens at a touch of a button, that is intelligent remediation. So these are some of the things that we hope that the market will, adopt more starting from the recent months through to 2024 and 2025.
Thank you. In a market flooded with RegTech companies, what criteria do you use to determine what to outsource and how to select the right solution?
I'll jump in. So we always, as I mentioned, on the lookout for a new vendor, new tech, and there's always a balance between whether we build something in-house or is it something that we're going to build ourselves. And that creates quite a few challenges and evaluation required to make sure that, first of all, on one side, you have to have a very strong vendor. You have to know everything about that vendor. And on the other side, you have to have a team in place at your financial institution that can intelligently bring everything together. Is there a perfect solution? Probably not, and there's still a balance. So maybe I'll explain that how we deal with vendors at MasterCard. So we all know that, and not to put anyone on the spot, but we I personally get approached multiple times per week with different vendors. And pretty much everyone gets a chance. We do look at demos, we do look and sign NDAs, but we are very, very strict and selective in how we conduct these meetings. So from personal experience, we all know that the demos look awesome. Everything works great. And something that we like to do, which is probably nerve-wracking for people on the other side, is testing during the demo. So we always ask that there would be a time set aside where we can perform some of the up-to-date testing. So what am I talking about? So for example, you are looking to deploy a particular solution. Let's say we're talking about AML and you're implementing a solution where you expect to see some of the KYC data going down to the nitty-gritty of the beneficial ownership, complexities, 50% rule calculation, all of that fun stuff. And we always have our examples handy because we have a lot of customers where we've taken very complex decisions on. So during the demo, of course, we'll look through the demo and we'll look through all of the nice presentation. We will start testing with those complex cases where we know the outcome. And for the most part, my team has 2 screens going. We have the data and provider that we currently have. We have our research that is done by an individual. And then now we're testing a demo. And if the demo does not produce, or if the solution does not produce the results that you're expecting to see, unfortunately, that's the feedback that we'll be providing. And we're very transparent. And usually it's taken very well. Folks actually come back and said, we have some work to do, and maybe we need to bring additional solutions or tools or maybe providers to get the right data. But this is our approach with vendor selection. Now, even if you select the right vendor, or even to get to that particular stage, we all know how painful it is to do vendor onboarding. Now, for us, it's a very long process. It's a very long process because it's a competitive process. We have to have competitive bids. It takes, well, months, many months, many months to get to a final solution. At the same time, as I mentioned, there should be parallel conversation with your internal data teams in whether they can replicate some of the tech that we are seeing. So in these demos, we have compliance professionals, we have legal, we have data folks, and that's important because I always want to make sure that our data people are in the room and present and able to see what is it that the business and compliance people are seeing, because they connect the dots in ways that we don't, right? And collectively, we can provide better feedback. Collectively, we can ask the right questions. What is the engine behind it? And those are some of the basics, very basics of what we do between demo selection and how we are partnering with external third parties. We also make sure that if we're dealing with regulatory space, knowing, so we have experts on the ground in many countries. And we are lucky to have the regulatory team, we are lucky to have compliance team, risk, privacy. MasterCard has, as you guys know, huge geographic footprint, global, and it's great to have on-the-ground professionals. So we slightly probably in the advantage space from the typical FIs. And when we know of upcoming regulations, or if there's a new upcoming regulation, and we're looking for a vendor that will provide that best solution, we're able to balance it. So the simple example, okay, well, just by sheer fact that there's due diligence, FinCEN requirements that are coming down the pipeline in beneficial ownership. Is that something you've seen in a solution? I mean, this is the basic, but going down to maybe state regulations and even town regulations, as I mentioned earlier, so those who are operating in US and need to understand whether in the financial institution is, let's say, banking, cannabis-related business. What are the regulations? How do you bring this all up? So this is a challenging space, but there's a way to test, right? And one of the things in my capacity, I visit a lot of customers, and I visit a lot of customers globally. And one of the things that we're seeing, and number one issue that I'm seeing from face-to-face interactions with many compliance officers is the team is unable to articulate how the tech is working. there's typically like best solution, and usually I'm asked this question all the time, well, what's the best solution for sanction screening? What is the best solution for regulatory insight? We're expanding into new geography. We're getting a license from MasterCard to operate, let's say, in Brazil. And we have the aspirations of going to Chile, Peru, and all these other areas. And what do you get the information about the right regulations? And we all know those regulations go so deep, and there's so many challenges in that space. So it's basically finding the right provider that will give you that on-the-ground expertise. A lot of folks are still using consoles on the ground, right? So I'm not sure how many of you in the room are utilizing that, but if those are, maybe by show of hands, how many are utilizing outside consoles on the ground? I don't know if there's, yeah. So I mean, it's still useful, it's still necessary because you have to always balance. And then you look at your tech and making sure that you find the perfect balance between that. But the point I was trying to make earlier, that once you implement on board that vendor, be sure that you're able back to articulate the requirements, how the system was set up, and it's not something that you put on the shelf. You always need to have the right people in the background testing, making sure it's still relevant. There is a number of times that we go on site and we do our elements of testing because we have MasterCard rules and want to make sure that customers are compliant with them. And it's very sad to see that during testing, how many things broken. Lists are not populated, new laws are not uploaded, and not having that testing component from a compliance, the effectiveness oversight is, it's really sad to see. So, so my recommendation is that whatever tech you guys going to implement, deploy, and wherever you're going to land, make sure that you know all the nitty-gritties. I'll give you an example. We have a vendor that we've onboarded and we've been partnering with for the past 8 years. For the past 8 years, I have a weekly call with them, weekly call for the past 8 years, to make sure that the tech is working the way it's supposed to. We have people in the background, because if we're going to rely on the technology, we're going to make sure that the technology is working the way it's supposed to. So we have the right people in the background testing, making sure it's that element and all the elements are working. If we find a weakness, we're working on those weekly meetings, we have the workouts, and we find a lot of weaknesses, to the point so that the vendor was able to elevate their solution and provide an elevated offering to their customers. So my takeaway, make sure that you know what you're dealing with. Make sure that you're able to articulate back to whoever's asking, regulator, examiner, auditor, MasterCard, if you have a MasterCard license, how the tech is working, and able to have oversight going forward. And that is crucial, because any solution can break, and that something that if you're going to rely on something, make sure that it's up to par.
I think that is great input for most of the vendors out here. I think some of the things that we're seeing as vendors that work with buyers. I know, HCL Software, I know, is kind of, is an empaneled software vendor with MasterCard. Took them about a year to get onboarded. So,
like I said, it takes a minute.
But I think what some of the things that, see, AI is all about, kind of picking up experiences and learning and, putting it along the way. A couple of things that we see that helps the process. Intelligence means faster deployments. I mean, you cannot just have intelligence that comes in, 6 years later. It starts at the point of deployment. So how can you now deploy software within weeks rather than, 18 months? So that's one. Second is something that we've, seen kind of building up in the GRC space. There are lots of FAQs. Just a simple example. So again, another one with, conversational generation, Gen AI is, can you just pick up, create very quick FAQs, business FAQs on the fly without code? We're seeing a lot of adoption of that. I think that really helps the whole onboarding process and, working with vendors going forward. The last part is training the models. I mean, this is something that I keep telling my customers. And you've got behavioral models, you've got AI. Your AI is as good as the SME that is training it. I mean, there's no shortcut to that. So It does take the AI a couple of months to start becoming super productive, start thinking the way you do, but you've got to create your mini-me's, right? So patience, and it really works, trust me. So cheers.
I just to add, Inessa, you did such an amazing job. I was just listening and mentally taking so many notes. I completely agree. I think from when we're looking for a third party, right, and a solution, you're really looking for the subject matter expertise and then the UI. If it's not simple to use, then no one's going to understand it. And then that UI is so important. And then, of course, you want the technical skills to be able to actually implement the subject matter expertise. And I would say asking a lot of questions, like you said. Sometimes we get criticized as compliance professionals for asking questions, but we're asking questions to truly understand, what the risks are, how it works. Because if we don't understand the risks, then we might have to stop something later, down the line. And we'd rather understand it all up front. And that's why we ask so many questions up front, so that we can understand the risks, put the controls in, so everything starts to, you feel the pain up front versus down the line. But I think, Inessa, you kind of wrote the manual for us.
Great, thank you.
Hammered many nails.
I'm channeling my inner Howard as best as I can here.
So we have 2 questions from the audience, 3. First one, how will technologies like ChatGPT alter the regulatory landscape long term?
So this is just my perspective. I would say, from what I'm, from a compliance professional perspective, I think it's becoming more and more important to really understand the subject matter, because now you have, if you have something from an output from a ChatGPT, you have to be able to challenge it, right? And be able to distinguish something that's, even if a word is used incorrectly, it can completely change the meaning or the interpretation of a regulation. So from a compliance professional perspective, really understanding and knowing your stuff inside out is so much more important, because you have to now be able to distinguish the output from these types of tools.
I like the point that you made earlier, being cautious, but also not closing your eyes to the tech, because it's so important to continuously improve our processes. And I think there is future. It just needs to be done cautiously in controlled environment. I can't say that I'm super excited about the new regulations, but I think they're highly necessary, right? So it's very necessary to be in a protective space. And I think as a compliance professionals, we're always going to be there to support and making sure that it's working properly. Right? Like you said, asking the right questions. Yeah, that is what we do, because in that you kind of get to the truth. But I think there is a place to be for ChatGPT, and it certainly will help us as professionals going forward. I truly hope so. And we're already seeing some promises, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. See, the thing is, alter, change. See, nobody likes rapid change. We know that, and nobody's comfortable with that. The feds aren't, right? So I think instead of that, if we look at this as how do you evolve along the way, and that's how ChatGPT should really work within the frameworks of the organization, which is very important. To a simple syntax error that can, a wrong syntax, a wrong word here can have, massive implications. So again, how do you model the AI? Bring about new use cases, at the same time, bring in the right controls. So you need a happy balance. And I think that's where domain and software manufacturers need to work together. But we definitely see this evolving. I think a lot of things will pan out in 2024, 2025. We'll see tons of use cases. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is, what are the most pressing roadblocks for startups in the RegTech space?
You've spoken to a lot.
Well, yeah, if you want to go first, and then I'll jump. Okay, so we work with a lot of fintechs, and we have StarPath. We have companies that we label StarPath companies. So this is something that MasterCard takes very seriously. We're in this space to make sure that there are definitely other entities, fintechs, disruptors in the space to be able to provide financial inclusion and operate in the space where big financial institutions are unable. So this is, we take that very seriously. So as part of that, we try to enable different components. So if you're a star path company or if you're developing fintech, there's so many different paths you can take with MasterCard. You don't have to go full stream. You can start as a smaller provider in a particular sector and work under maybe somebody that we call a sponsor. In that space, you can cultivate your experience. You have exposure to MasterCard experts. You'll have access to compliance teams around the world. So as I mentioned, we do take it very seriously. It's very important. It's very important in developing economies. And it's very productive. I've personally seen fintechs that would sit in the team around the table, a new company. Everybody looks about my son's age. And now it's one of the, that was back in the days. And now I see this as one of the most robust fintechs in Europe and now expanding in multiple geographies. It's truly exceptional to see them from the very infancy stage all the way to this major player in the space. And I'd like to think that we did a lot of well, take a little bit of credit because we did work with them quite a bit to elevate their programs, to elevate their compliance, to teach the compliance to the point that in our collaborative environment, when we were speaking and providing feedback on, let's say, on their monitoring and how they're analyzing regulations, the folks at the table were taking notes, and which I was thinking they were playing games because it didn't look like, it was a very different dynamic, but at the same time, people were coding next to me and really taking the requirements that I was giving them and putting rules in place, and it was exceptional to see. And this type of environment we need to cultivate and bring forward because this is phenomenal. And coming from, I've worked in many big financial institutions, never seen anything like that, and it's amazing.
After you, Smita.
Yeah, two things I would add. I would say one thing I've seen is them trying to do too many things at once. And I would say focus, really focus on what problem you're trying to solve. And so I would say that's, and everything you said, Inessa. And the other thing is documentation. I would say that's something that we work, when we work with fintechs, we spend a lot of time on really upgrading their documentation so it meets the bank standards, and that's an investment I would say that they should launch.
See, as we were a AI startup. We're not a startup anymore. We're part of the big boys now. I think what really took us over helped us, go through the hoops, jump through the hurdle, above the hurdles was. Are you solving real-world problems? So I think that's where, they talked about, certain relationships, incubations of, incubating technologies. See, this country doesn't lack dearth of talent. I mean, just look at the number of people enrolling into computer science in a year. Oh, God. Everybody's got an idea. But are you really solving a real-world problem? And so that's where you got to go to the market. That's my sincere advice. That's what we did 5 years back. We went to the market. We found out, we extensively, without worrying about, you have to worry about revenues in the first year, obviously. But talk to people that you can beta with, talk to people and ask them what are the problems that are keeping them up at night. And those are the problems to solve. And those are the problems to pump your money into. Just kind of 2 cents of advice here.
I'll just add, so don't be afraid of working with smaller startups. It's very, as I mentioned in my example, the amount of feedback that you can provide and they can bring back a solution that can elevate and help in many areas of the business. So you can proceed cautiously, you can do your due diligence, but don't be afraid of working with startups. Don't be afraid to working with the new developing companies. It's actually excellent to see that type of partnership, and we've been very successful in this space.
I would just add, just to become extremely familiar with third-party regulations.
Yes.
One more question. Should banks become collaborative in their efforts to prevent financial crime? What is your perspective?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. I think knowledge sharing, the forums, the networking, all of these events, I think if you get anything from the conference today is the networking, finding the counterparts at other financial institutions, leveraging the experience, knowledge sharing, collaboration, totally. All these forums that different groups are organizing from ACAMS, from ABA, super exceptional, and the strength is in numbers, especially if you need to provide feedback to a new regulation, which we all know some of them don't make sense.
I would add that in addition to that, I mean, there's many, I would say, ecosystems and consortiums that share data, and then I mean, that's, I would say, basic. You have to do that to kind of fight fraud.
Oh yeah, we're seeing this in payments. I mean, faster payments, it's been going through the Congress a lot. I mean, we're hoping that it'll come up soon. But then if you look at unified payments, and if you look at something like, what's happened in India, massive amount of, unified payments, it really was all about bringing the banks and, the fintechs together. So we definitely expect to see that happening a lot. You're already seeing a couple of technologies, Zelle, et cetera. We're already seeing that happen. But yeah, absolutely. And there are technologies there to support it. Amongst all the vendors out here, I speak for them. We do.
Great, thank you. Well, that wraps up the panel. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.